Hunted the finance questions all the way back to you again. So I'll start with one. We, as you are aware, have a structural deficit currently in our budget. We've heard many folks tell us that in these opportunity times that you lean on those strategic planning, you know, what's established, which we also don't have formally in place when you get here. So as we look at some of the short-term needs, you know, that structural deficit requires, how do you go about prioritizing budgets and spending, and how do you get buy-in from community staff, especially students, if and when things need to look different than they have in the past?
So that's a really hard question because it's a complex budget and it will be difficult to identify priorities quickly. But I also understand that when you're in a structural deficit situation, the longer you push difficult decisions down the road, the more drastic the solutions need to be. And you don't want to be in that situation. So I think you have to develop a plan to look for any low-hanging fruit that might be available to improve that deficit situation while you're engaged in the long-term planning, because there's no substitute for that. Especially in a district that has so much programming, and I was able to experience that last Thursday on my visit. I saw, gosh, just in the first hour, 2 immersion programs. I'm going to say this wrong. Gone boarding was pretty cool, as well as project-based learning. You know, it was amazing, and that was in an hour. I could have spent the whole day in one building. So, and that was just one building. and then just an exemplary elementary school. And then the nature school, Goodwill, yeah. Which I especially enjoyed the authentic experience of the chicken coop in the pouring rain. But, you know, in a half day to see all of that and know that's just scratching the surface. So those are all really important programs that make Forest Hills special. So how are we going to pay for all that? How are we going to make those decisions? And you cannot make those decisions without process and data. So you can't rush that. You can look for less impactful. I guess the analogy I would use is an onion. Things more on the outer layers of the onion to try to improve your situation. But we're going to have to engage in some really challenging work to decide what's most important in the school district and what are we going to prioritize, because we're in a deficit situation and we cannot put ourselves long-term in a really unenviable financial position while we try to maintain programs. We're going to have to make difficult decisions. And I guess I think that's what you should expect from your superintendent, is that they are going to, or that person is going to engage in a process to help this community make the challenging decisions it has to make. And maybe we will find that in time, situations improve. We certainly want to preserve everything we can, but part of this is prioritizing.
As the current superintendent, how do you continue involvement with students?
So I talked about this in my yellow section of my presentation, but I visit schools. I spend time in classrooms. When I was in Novi, had the great fortune of working with Dr. Steve Matthews, who's now the superintendent of Rockford, and he did that in a district of 7,000 students. So it's not that difficult for me to do it in a district of 3,300 students. This district has 9,000 plus, but it's a priority. And that's the first piece. I also, in Mason, I'm fortunate enough to work with a high school leadership group. The teacher who is the sponsor of that group invites me and a handful of others, a board member, a couple of other administrators and some teachers, and we meet quarterly, and they come prepared with all kinds of topics. We spend about an hour and a half, and in the process I've developed some relationships with those kids. I work with students any way I can, and there's always a challenge in every day of managing priorities and time, but the business is about students, so it's important that there are goals.
Give me a second, because you kind of answered one of the questions I was gonna ask, so hang on a second, I'll pull up another one here. Can't find the other one I wanted, so, how do you plan to collaborate with local businesses, organizations, and higher educational institutes to provide students with real-world learning experience and opportunities for career exploration?
So, I think there are some significant advantages to being in Grand Rapids, where there are just so many amazing businesses that offer opportunity for students. I can't speak specifically to that because I don't know the area well enough to comment specifically, but this is a vibrant business community and looking for opportunities to support students. I think that's how innovation happens. I would cite that Go Boarding program as a perfect example of that. While I certainly don't know the full history of how that program evolved, I was told, I think by Mr. Harvey, that we have students in that program who end up, working for Burton and other, competing companies. And what an amazing opportunity for students. So what else might we do to give students those kinds of opportunities to interact with the business world? So we also have academic institutions right in our backyard, and in Ingham County, certainly we try to partner with Michigan State whenever we can. I have some administrators from their teacher prep program coming to my April leadership team meeting to talk about changes in their teacher prep program and how Mason Public Schools can partner with Michigan State to attract more student teachers and interns into our building because it's a competitive workforce. So that's just an example of a partnership. I think building relationships with Grand Valley, with Calvin, Aquinas, Shirley, a few out, is important. And what can we do to partner to benefit our students?
All right, thank you. How do you decide when it is, if you've got something that you know is best for kids, like you've done the studies, like for instance, starting school later for high schoolers, as an example, is something that's been shown that's good for kids, but there are also a lot of reasons and pushback against it because of all the changes that would occur. How do you decide when it's best to push through an initiative that you know is best for kids? And when do you, even if the community isn't ready, versus when you let it go because the community isn't ready, but ultimately you know that that's not what's best for kids. So where do you find that fulcrum that you can talk?
So I think at the end of the day, you have to make decisions about, is that a challenge that offers enough benefit to our students to take on how difficult the task might be? And I like your example because I experienced that. So we've done a Novi in now 2021 or 2021, I believe. And we built a pretty extensive group of people that studied the issue. The research is crystal clear that our students our high school kids going to school at 7:20 every morning is not good practice. And I lived that as a parent when I watched my daughter get 5 hours of sleep or less night after night, and we wonder why kids struggle. So if we decide that our high school kids are in school too early, then I think, and when I say we, I think that involves the 7 of you, and we have to decide together that we're going to take that on, or maybe we're not. But if we do, then we develop a process to where we can really evaluate what the research tells tells us. And then we have to talk about how can we implement that? You know, and that example is a challenging one, for obvious reasons. We know that our students are involved in a myriad of extracurricular activities, and how will that work if they're in school until 3:30 or 4:45? How much school do students miss attending athletic events or clubs or whatever? And then we have to prioritize and make decisions about whether what the change really gets us the benefit that we're hoping for. But it's not something I make myself. It is something we make together, and then we develop the process, and if we know that it's the right work, then we drive it through, and we have to collectively own it. But I realize that as a superintendent, I'm the leader of that. And, you know, it won't come without pushback, because if there was no pushback, it would be easy and we wouldn't be having this discussion. So when there's pushback, it's making sure people understand the reasons we're doing it. And in this particular instance, it's because we know it's best for kids. And the challenges we're facing and pulling it off are worth it. And, you know, nobody made it happen. It was, the solution was not as intensive as some would like. It was a bit of a compromise, but we bought our kids about 45 minutes of sleep 180 days a year. Cumulatively, that's